Oxfam understands our work is basically addressing issues of power. Who has power, and how those with power are using their power or abusing their power, and how those with little power can grow that power, can share that power, can use that power to transform their reality. And we bring a rights-based approach to all of the work that we bring and all the work that we do. And when you have rights, in relation to rights, there are duty bearers. So you as individuals, as human beings, and as citizens have rights, and governments have responsibilities to create the environment in which you can exercise and enjoy your rights. So a lot of our work is about speaking truth to power and challenging governments for them to do what they need to do in order that citizens in the North and in the South can exercise their rights. And we focus particularly on women and girls because we know that while there are many factors that impact people's access to power and the use of that power, the most pernicious and persistent predictor of poverty and powerlessness is gender. So that is the nut that needs to be cracked, and that's the core of our work. That's not an analysis that is shared by the current government. And so you have a dynamic where the government has identified maternal health as an important initiative. And there's no question that it is a very important question that governments globally need to mobilize around. A number of you will know that in the year 2000, the world leaders came together and identified what were called Millennium Development Goals. It was a 15-year plan to try and reduce poverty, to try and reduce maternal mortality, to try and increase the number of girls in school. There were a number of different goals set. None of them as ambitious as the goals that had been set in Beijing or Cairo, but they were the plan that this government and other governments around the world subscribed to. And 10 years toward that 15-year target, we are far short of meeting our objectives, and we're in fact further behind now than we were 2 years ago because of the perfect storm in which women and girls globally find themselves, where you have the global financial crisis and the food crisis and the fuel crisis and the climate crisis and the global care crisis, all conspiring to, in fact, increase the numbers of people on this planet who are desperately poor. And just to remind you, to be poor on this planet, that means less than $1.25 a day. If you have an income of $2 a day, you are not poor by the UN standard or World Bank standard or any official statistic. When we're talking about poor, we're talking about less than $1.25 a day per person. And so when we look at the progress that has been made, as I say, progress on maternal mortality is the goal where we have made the least progress. And that is absolutely clearly because we as a world have not decided that it matters whether there are hundreds on this planet who are dying needlessly. And when we make that decision from a rights-based approach. And when you make that decision from a rights-based approach, then you understand the central role that sexual and reproductive rights have in that dynamic, and the central role that access to contraception, family planning, and abortion services play. Let me give you a few statistics. Every year there are about 344,000 women who die in childbirth or in complications arising from pregnancies. That's a woman every single minute on the face of this planet dies needlessly while as I say, giving birth or arising from a pregnancy. Of those women, 13% die in botched abortions. So every 8 minutes on this planet, there's a woman who's dying because of an unsafe abortion. And 99% of those women are in Africa, or in South Asia, or in Latin America. And for every woman that dies, there are 30 women who are permanently disabled because of, again, complications arising from abortions. And who are those women? Most of them are under 20 or over 40. They're girls, or they're women who already have several children, maybe more than several children, and are saying, "Ja, basta, no more." Those are the women who are being forced to access abortion services that are putting their lives in jeopardy. And it is absolutely essential that we be very clear about this. Abortions are going to happen. That's not the question here. The question is, are abortions going to happen in a safe facility, attended by a midwife or someone with medical training, or are they going to happen in an alley, in a field, in a hut? That's the only question at play here. Because these women do not have choices. They are seeking an abortion because they must. The other dimension of this that is completely ignored by the Prime Minister and his cronies is the fact that so many of these pregnancies arise from violence. The pandemic of gender-based violence globally, the hundreds of thousands of women who find themselves in a situation where they're living in a country where rape is a strategy of war, and they're deliberately being raped and impregnated in order to deal with the terror and trauma of that experience, but also to deal with the aftermath, the caustic and corrosive impact on their culture and their community and their nation of giving birth to a generation of children born of violence. And having spent time in Darfur in the camps and having spent time in other countries around this world where that is not the exception, that is the day-to-day reality for hundreds of thousands of young women, it is obscene to be in a country where this government is advocating a response to maternal health that excludes the reality of those women, those girls, most particularly when we know that as difficult as it is for too many women in this country to fully exercise their sexual and reproductive rights, the disparity between what we expect in Canada and what we are insisting in other countries is a breach that is unacceptable and must be stopped. The obscenity, when we talk about aid effectiveness and all of the language that gets spun in the media press releases from this government, to think that in fact even 1 penny of that money is going to be spent hiring some accountant or auditor to go through the healthcare systems of a Mozambique or a Rwanda to ensure that none of the Canadian money is going to arrive in room 147 at 2 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon, because in that room we know there's something that is happening that Canada won't fund, when in fact every single penny of that money should be going to ensure that those girls and those women have access to the counseling and support they need in order that they can negotiate the terms of sex with their partners, and that they can insist that a condom's being used, or that they can access other forms of contraception, in order to ensure that they are being supported in demanding of their government access to services, quality services, free services that meet their needs and meet the needs of their family and their community. And that we see women consistently, not just as incubators and wombs, but as victims and survivors, rather than as leaders, as change agents, as actors within their civil society, and that we dismember the reality of maternal mortality from the human rights context and the social context in which it thrives. So it's only when we situate this problem in its context of their rights as human beings, and we ensure that this is not about charity, and it's not about a gift, and it's not about the whim of some bureaucrat or some 24-year-old on his BlackBerry in the Prime Minister's office who thinks he has the best idea as to what we should be doing and how we should be doing it. But it's rooted in the reality of real people on this planet who are making change in their lives and making change in ours. That's when we'll have a difference that we can support. And until then, we need to continue to be in the streets and in the courts and in the legislature and in every other space we can, tweeting, in order to deliver this message, wake people up to this reality, and mobilize them for change.